Chapter 91. Even though Jingwan was pretending to be calm, the slight blush on her cheeks and the flustered look in her eyes still fell into the eyes of a certain beast. Not to mention that he was already experienced with age and had a pair of discerning eyes, he would naturally not pay attention to people he did not care about. As for the person he cared about the most, Li Hongyuan did not even have to think to know what Jingwan was thinking about. After all, WN was a young lady who had never experienced love before. Even if she was a mature and experienced person, it would be strange if she was the same in this aspect. Taking advantage of the moment when Jingwan lowered her eyes to greet him, Li Hongyuan could not help but smile. He clenched his fist and placed it by his lips to prevent himself from laughing out loud. However, when he saw Jingwan's rosy little face, he really wanted to pull her into his embrace and take a few bites of her. As some thoughts started to stir again, Li Hongyuan's eyes became increasingly deep and serene. At this moment, Li Hongyuan did not say get up and Jingwan remained in her original state. Li Hongyuan looked at her quietly and saw that the blush on her face had disappeared and returned to its natural pink color. She did not have any makeup on her face and her lips were very beautiful and tender. Li Hongyuan rubbed his lips and recalled the delicious taste that he had plucked from her lips in his previous life. Not to mention that she was still young and in her prime, her lips were tender and soft. In his previous life, due to the ravages of wind and frost, she had inevitably become rough even though she was a natural beauty. Even though her lips were a little chapped, the taste still made his heart palpitate. In his previous life, there were many beautiful women, of all shapes and sizes, but at most, he would stop after tasting them. This was probably because Shangxin had triggered the deepest feelings in him. Perhaps at that time, he had already completely fallen into her hands. He might have resisted at the beginning, but when he allowed himself to sink into her, she was gone. When they met again, Jingwan heard what sounded like a painful groan from Li Hongyuan and instinctively lifted her eyes to look at him. She saw that he was frowning and clutching his chest. His breathing was a little heavy, but his eyes were fixed on her like a wild beast that was ready to pounce. Jingwan could not help but take a step back. She did not know if this action had angered him, but Li Hongyuan suddenly stood up, grabbed her wrist and pulled her into his embrace before returning to his original seat. "Your Highness," Jingwan exclaimed. Perhaps she was subconsciously apprehensive about the current situation, but she subconsciously lowered her voice and pressed her hands against Li Hongyuan's chest. Even if someone saw him now, they would not associate him with Li Hongyuan's imperial bodyguard. Hearing this, he couldn't help but curse in his heart. Master, this shameless person, actually pretended to be a modest gentleman. Big-tailed wolf, so be it. You can pretend for a while, but you can pretend for a lifetime. In the future, when Miss Luo finds out, you're not afraid of being punished. No, Your Highness doesn't need to take it to heart. It had to be said that his attitude really surprised Jingwan. Whether it was what she heard or the few times she met him, it was poles apart from the current situation. Li Hongyuan seemed to be able to see through her thoughts at a glance. He chuckled, "After all, you are this prince's savior." Jingwan was startled, not only because of Li Hongyuan's words, but also because of that smile. It was simply a blooming peony. Although it might be an ink peony, it was also the most luxurious, the most rare, and the one that was unbelievably beautiful. Li Hongyuan relaxed his body and calmly leaned back. His expression was languid, but there was also a bit of charm. Jingwan's lips and teeth slightly opened, spitting out two words, "Evildor." Li Hongyuan didn't hear what she said clearly, but from the shape of her lips, he could more or less guess it. "What did Miss Luo say?" "Ah, nothing. I don't know what instructions Your Highness has for this subject." Li Hongyuan's line of sight fell on Jingwan's neck. "How is Miss Luo's injury?" Jingwan subconsciously reached out to cover her neck, but seeing Li Hongyuan's calm and upright expression, as if he really was just concerned about her and didn't have any other meaning, Jingwan felt that she overreacted. Her face reddened and she put down her hand, "Thanking Your Highness for your concern, it's almost healed." "What does Miss Luo want?" Li Hongyuan acted as if he didn't notice her movements and spoke softly. Jingwan hesitated for a moment. "This subject thinks, Your Highness's bodyguard should have passed on this subject's words to Your Highness." Li Hongyuan waved his hand, That's nothing. Although this prince is a bit of a bastard, it's not to the point of forcing people to do things against their will. Moreover, this isn't as simple as saving your life. Jingwan understood the meaning behind Li Hongyuan's words. If she didn't ask for something, perhaps Jin Qinwang wouldn't be at ease. She had caught his handle, so how could she let him have some handle on her? Jingwan was silent for a moment before she slowly opened her mouth. Can your highness and Jiao Jie dissolve the engagement? Li Hongyuan probably didn't think that she would make such a request. Miss Luo's concern for her good friend is truly meticulous. Jingwan could hear that his tone had become a bit colder and knew that her request was very inappropriate. As the saying goes, it's better to tear down a temple than to destroy a marriage. Moreover, by making such a request, wasn't it clearly telling him that he wasn't a good person? Even as an outsider, she would rather damage her good friend's reputation and wanted to interfere with this marriage. Looking down on him like this, even if it was an ordinary man, he would be angry, not to mention that he was of noble descent. These words could be compared to offending one's superior. Jingwan hurriedly got up and apologized. This subject's daughter is rude, please forgive me, your highness. To be disdained by the person at the top of one's heart, it was impossible to say that one didn't feel anything. What's more, she was so attentive to other people, yet she was so distant with him that she could even be considered a stranger. He was very unwilling. But when he saw Jingwan frowning with an uneasy expression, he also felt distressed. Forget it, he could always make it up to her in the future. Get up, your highness. Ben Wang didn't mean to blame you. Your request, your highness, Ben Wang agrees. Your highness. Jingwan raised her head to look at him, somewhat in disbelief. Li Hongyuan laughed in spite of himself. Is it possible that Ben Wang's life is not worth a marriage that no one is willing to accept? Many thanks to your highness, but I'm afraid that this matter will make your highness feel awkward. It's not awkward, it's just being a scoundrel again. Ben Wang has done a lot of scoundrels, so this one won't make a difference. Li Hongyuan said rather self-deprecatingly. Jingwan's lips quivered, feeling rather guilty. Li Hongyuan, this big-tailed wolf, was wagging his tail in his heart. This was originally part of his plan, but now that he had an unexpected harvest, it could be considered a small compensation for him. But there is one thing that I need to remind Miss Luo. This prince has a reputation of bringing bad luck to his wife. None of the women that have been engaged to this prince have a good ending. I'm afraid that before this prince can resolve this matter, something will happen to your good sister. Jingwan gave an indifferent smile. That's pure nonsense. This subject doesn't believe in such things. Even if something like this really happened, it's probably because I haven't met the destined person. That's right, you haven't met the destined person. In your previous life, you didn't meet the destined person, so your ending was tragic. This prince didn't meet the destined person, so I was deceived and betrayed. The two of us should be together. Sit down. Your highness, if there's nothing else, this subject will take her leave first. After all, Miss Luo, are you planning to throw me away after using me? You're not even willing to sit with this prince for a while longer? Jingwan was speechless. What did he mean by throwing me away after using me? His words made her speechless, as if she had nothing to say. But since he had said so, Jingwan could only sit back down. For a moment, the carriage fell into silence. Jingwan looked down and Li Hongyuan kept looking at her. With such an unabashed gaze, it was difficult for Jingwan to pretend that she didn't know. Finally, she couldn't help but look at Li Hongyuan. Is this subject and that girl that similar? Li Hongyuan was somewhat baffled by her question and for a moment, he didn't respond. Jingwan's imagined result was that this Jin prince originally had a true love, but she didn't know why she left him. Perhaps because of this, he became greedy for flowers and beauties. She originally thought that he was muddle-headed from his fever that night, so he held on to the person in front of him. But looking at him just now, he was clearly sober and did the same thing. Then it could only mean that there were similarities between her and that girl, and she was afraid that it was quite a lot. Although saying it might expose his scars and even anger him, it was very uncomfortable to be stared at from the back. Therefore, Jingwan was bold for once. Seeing that he didn't understand, she deliberated for a moment. it's that WNWN girl that you spoke of. How could Li Hongyuan not understand? She thought that he treated her as someone else. His face immediately darkened. He did so much, and this was the result. He really wanted to directly pull her over, strip her clothes, and then tell her who the person he called was. Jingwan felt that she might have lit a barrel of explosives. Jin Prince seemed to want to strangle her. Jingwan was vexed. How could she be muddle-headed and dare to stroke the tiger's whiskers? Was it because the man in front of her was too peaceful? Or was she relying on her resemblance to his sweetheart, relying on the fact that she was his savior? In fact, Jingwan herself didn't realize that she had always been a cautious person, but on Li Hongyuan's matters, she was bold more than once. Wang Ye, calm your anger. Who told you that? Li Hongyuan said through gritted teeth. Is it not? Jingwan weakly asked. Li Hongyuan was choked by her. It had always been him choking others. Was Jingwan here specifically to subdue him? In fact, Jingwan couldn't be blamed for thinking this way. There was no way to explain this matter. Shut up for Ben Wang. Jingwan obediently did as she was told. After all, this living king of hell only told her to shut up and didn't directly strangle her to death. This was already very benevolent. Li Hongyuan frowned and fiercely closed his eyes, covering his eyes. Jingwan didn't expect that this insufferably arrogant man would be in so much pain. Sure enough, no matter how ruthless and dark a person was, there would always be a soft side to his heart. After Li Hongyuan moved his hand away, he had already recovered his calm. He only faintly looked at Jingwan. Jingwan pursed her lips. This subject's daughter is very sorry. Sorry is enough. Since Miss Luo feels this way, why don't you compensate Ben Wang with yourself? Li Hongyuan coldly said. Wang Ye, please have some self-respect. Although Jingwan felt guilty about what happened just now, it didn't mean that she would obediently be humiliated. TSK, she was still so amenable to coaxing but not coercion. In her previous life, this kind of personality was more or less a factor in her suffering. Under the imperial power, it could be said that without power, there was no right to be arrogant. It was even more likely that one's pride would be broken. In reality, if WNWN chose herself and abandoned her husband's family, she could at least live. But she was unyielding and unyielding. Her husband's family didn't betray her, so she didn't abandon them and chose the most difficult and tragic path. There is no such thing as self-respect for Ben Wang. What do you want? Jingwan frowned and coldly looked at him. Wang Ye's position is high and powerful. In your eyes, this subject's daughter is naturally nothing. The Luo family. The two words Li Hongyuan made Jingwan shut her mouth. In fact, her weakness was very obvious and easy to catch. People like them would definitely be able to catch her easily. Wang Ye doesn't need to use the Luo family to threaten this subject's daughter. This subject's daughter should bear the consequences of her own actions. Rather die as a piece of jade than as an intact tile, banishing yourself from the Luo family. Surprise flashed through Jingwan's eyes. This man is really terrifying, seeing through everything. Sure enough, when faced with a threat to the Luo family, she would still make the same choice. Li Hongyuan laughed. Ben Wang is not someone who will not be implicated just because he has distanced himself from the relationship. Enough, Ben Wang is not such a petty person. I won't go as far as to exterminate an entire family over such a small matter. Seeing that Jingwan was still frowning, he was slightly displeased. Girls should dress up beautifully and live their own days without worries. Don't think about this and that all day long. If you worry too much, be careful that you will age quickly. Your future husband will be distressed. Jingwan raised her eyebrows again. Was this really what Jin Qinwang said? And the speed at which he changed his face, just treat it as if Ben Wang treats you as her. However, you can rest assured that Ben Wang will not do anything to you. This was not an excuse to be good to her. As for this misunderstanding, since it had already been created, he would slowly think of a way to eliminate it after marriage. In any case, at that time, the person would already be in his mouth. There would be time to grind with her, time to let her see the truth clearly. You can go back early. Jingwan only felt that Jin Qinwang's attitude was a bit strange. It was really like what he said, treating her as her. But she felt that it was not the case. However, being alone with a man for so long was indeed very inappropriate. Since she was allowed to leave, Jingwan also did not stay for long. Chenu will retire. And Yi very perceptively lifted the curtain from the outside and put a stool next to the carriage. He respectfully asked Jingwan to get off the carriage. After getting off the carriage, Jingwan looked back at Li Hongyuan. Li Hongyuan sat upright and nodded at her with a faint smile. His eyes were faintly gentle, but it did not seem like he was looking at others through her. Seeing that their family's young lady had finally come down, Gong Mema and the servant girls hurriedly went up to greet her. The servant girls' faces were full of anxiety. Seeing that Jingwan's complexion was not very good, they thought that something had happened. Gong Mema slightly frowned. Because the two carriages were far apart, she could only faintly hear some things and could not connect all the things together. "Young lady, it's nothing, go back." Jingwan waved her hand. Seeing that she did not want to say more, Gong Mema also did not ask anything. She just looked at Li Hongyuan in the carriage from a distance. A long time after Luo family's carriage left, Li Hongyuan was still sitting there, not saying a word. He did not speak, so An Yi could not do anything, just like a shadow. In fact, when An Yi heard Jingwan's words, he slightly sympathized with his master. "An Yi, are you thinking that this is the retribution for Ben Wang's usual evil deeds?" An Yi was shocked into a cold sweat. This feeling of being seen through in an instant was really terrifying. This subordinate does not dare. Return to the Fu. Yes. Returning to Jin Qinwang Fu, Mu Gonggong told him two things. First, Chen family's third branch had arrived in the capital. Second, Kang Qinwang had entered the palace. Wan, you're going to get engaged. Although this was a planned matter, his heart was still very unhappy. Chapter 92. When Jingwan returned to the Luo family, she had already regained her calm. She didn't know what Jin Qinwang wanted to do, but she could only do what she should do. If something happened, then she would deal with it accordingly. If she couldn't deal with it, then perhaps she should just wait for someone to deal with it. Jingwan didn't take the initiative to talk about it, so Gong Mema also didn't ask. Even if Jingwan treated her as an elder, after all, there was a difference between master and servant. In addition, Jingwan herself had her own opinions. Even if she was worried, she would strictly abide by her duties and wouldn't ask about everything. She just repeatedly instructed the two servant girls accompanying her to keep their mouths shut and not mention a single word to anyone. The two servant girls also knew that this matter was related to their family's young lady's reputation, so they repeatedly promised Gong Mema. As for the coachman, Gong Mema just said a few words. Regarding this person, Gong Mema wasn't worried at all, because he was the living king of Hell's people. The arrival of the Chen family's third branch in the capital also meant that the marriage between Jingwan and Chen Zhengmin was officially put on the table. When the Chen family came to the Luo family, after Chen Zhengmin's elders saw Jingwan, there was no one who was dissatisfied. Such a young lady was simply outside of their expectations. Chen Zhengmin's mother took off a bracelet on the spot and put it on Jingwan's hand. After that, the entire Luo family basically knew about this marriage. Perhaps it was because Luo Jingying had gotten a definite answer from her father. Her father had listened to her suggestion and she would get what she wanted, so she was in a good mood. That was why she smiled at everyone she met. It was the kind of smile that came from the bottom of her heart. She did not act one way in front of others or behind their backs. With the help of Luo Rongping's money, Luo Jingying looked brand new. In the past, she didn't like delicate and beautiful clothes and jewelry, but now she was very fond of them. Those things that she loved in the past, in a flash, were discarded by her like worn-out shoes. It was so natural that one couldn't see any reluctance. It must be said that some of her strength was really not ordinary. Luo Jingying took the servant girls to the begonia house. Mai Mai congratulates third Jejia here. Jingwan glanced at her from head to toe. Unlike Luo Jingying's expectation, she chuckled and said, "Congratulations to you too." Luo Jingying was startled and a little flustered. Could it be that their third branch's plan had been found out? But thinking about it, it was simply impossible. Third elder sister really knows how to joke. Little sister doesn't have any good news. The third branch is harmonious. Third uncle treats fourth sister even better than before. Third aunt is also more virtuous and generous. Fourth sister is going to have a younger brother or sister. Isn't that a good thing? Jingwan said with some doubt. Even though Luo Jingying was in a good mood, her face cracked a little. She knew better than anyone the reason why the third branch could have a temporary peace. They were clearly poking her where it hurt. Luo Jingying was so vicious. She originally wanted to wait until she had a bright future and ask Prince Rui to support her third elder sister's husband's family. But it seemed that it was completely unnecessary. If she couldn't grasp the opportunity given to her, what else could she do? As for that slut, now that her father was protecting her, she could be arrogant for a while. When she and Prince Rui's matter was settled, she would slowly deal with her and the bastard child in her belly. Third elder sister is right. It is indeed a good thing. Jingwan smiled and nodded. Luo Jingying came happily and left angrily. She couldn't say anything now. Just wait and see. One day, Luo Jingwan will have to kneel and beg me. Fourth young lady is becoming more and more unruly. Qingju was outspoken. After Luo Jingying left, she couldn't help but twitch her mouth. Shut up. How is fourth young lady? It's not something you can talk about. The wet nurse patted Qingju. Qingju wrinkled her nose and didn't speak anymore. The others laughed and shook their heads. Because both sides had intentions, the rest of the matter was natural. The third branch of the Chen family had just arrived in the capital and naturally didn't have time to buy many things. However, the first branch had already prepared. They didn't think that the third branch would refuse this marriage. In fact, when Chen Zhengmin learned of this matter, he was overjoyed. This was something he had never expected. He didn't dare to dream of a girl like the third cousin of the Luo family before. If he could get a good ranking after this imperial examination, it would be fine. But now, he was so happy that he was silly. Na Tsili was well behaved. The geese he used were the commonly used wooden ones. Chen Zhengmin wanted to get a live one, but unfortunately, he could only dream about it. Fortunately, whether it was the Luo family or Jingwan herself, they didn't care too much about this. It was enough for them to be polite. Then, it was time to exchange the marriage invitation. In just a few days, it was basically done smoothly. However, because Jingwan's coming-of-age hairpin ceremony had to wait until next year, whether it was Madame Luo, Luo Peishan, or even Jingwan's parents, they all hoped to keep Jingwan for 2 more years. Therefore, the wedding date was at least 2 years away. This gave Chen Zhengmin some time to make some achievements. At least, the elders of the Luo family would be more assured to hand Jingwan over to him. He also thought so. A girl like his cousin needed to be pampered. He couldn't have nothing. When all these things were settled, Madame Luo also breathed a sigh of relief. Before, she still felt uneasy. It seemed that she thought too much. She didn't know if it was intentional or not, but Jingwan's engagement was done very low-key. Of the 3 best sisters she met after entering the capital, only Yuan Xiaoqiao knew some news from her mother. After all, this kind of happy event, it was normal for relatives to know. The other 2 were completely unaware, especially Sun Yijia. Perhaps she faintly felt that Sun Yijia really wanted her to be her sister-in-law. These days, Jingwan even unilaterally cut off all contact with Sun Yijia. Fortunately, because of the trouble caused by Kang Qinwang, Jin Qinwang, and Sun Yilin, Ding Guogongfu was once again in the midst of the wind and waves. Sun Yijia was getting married next month and had a lot of things to do. Jingwan hid it from her, so she couldn't go to the Luo family. The wedding date was still early. Embroidering the dowry and so on could be done slowly. Therefore, Jingwan went out. It was time to go see Yuan Xiaoqiao and Zhu Yingshuang. As for Ding Guogongfu, it was not convenient to go for the time being. The love triangle between the 3 men and how the court and the harem had become, Jingwan knew clearly from her grandfather, Luo Peishan. After Jingwan heard about it, there was only one word that could describe her feelings: embarrass. In her opinion, this matter was most likely caused by Jin Qinwang. If he really didn't care about men and women, he most likely wouldn't reach out his hand to Sun Yilin. What could be done? What could be done that would be disadvantageous to him? There was no reason for that kind of person to not be clear. Playing around was one thing, but if it was for real, then it was completely different. However, Jingwan always felt that it might not be just because his bad temper flared up. Doing something for entertainment when he had nothing to do was probably just to cover up his true purpose. But she also didn't hear her grandfather mention anything else in the court that was worth paying attention to. If Jingwan knew that Li Hongyuan's purpose was just to tie down the feet of one love rival and let the other love rival smoothly get engaged with the girl at the bottom of his heart, what kind of expression would she have? Making such a big fuss, was it just to help the love rival? It should be said that Jin Qinwang really wasn't an ordinary person. His mind was treacherous, and he didn't act according to common sense. Even when she went to see the people who were recuperating, she didn't bring any medicinal herbs or the like. Those things, the Luo family had already sent a lot of them over. Jingwan only brought a few pots of flowers and plants, as well as the rouge and face powder that she had made these days. There were also some skincare products, all of which were made with pure natural ingredients, so there was no need to worry about being poisoned. Jingwan first went to the Yuan family. Yuan Xiaoqiao's father was the director of the Ministry of Appointments. A fourth-rank official, in a local area, may be a leader, but in a place like the capital, it really didn't count for much. However, the Ministry of Appointments was in charge of the appointment, dismissal, examination, promotion, transfer, and so on. Therefore, even if it was the lowest rank official in the Ministry of Appointments, there would still be a lot of people fighting over it. Didn't you see how when Jingwan and the others entered the capital, when eldest aunt came to visit, Lucia anxiously rushed forward to curry favor? Yuan Xiaoqiao's situation wasn't bad. Luo Peishan personally invited the imperial physicians from the imperial hospital, and with the medicine prescribed by Great Master Liaochen, her situation was much better than expected. Compared to before, her body might be a bit weaker, but it wasn't to the extent that she would become a pot of medicine that couldn't be exposed to the wind. As long as the broken leg was properly taken care of, there wouldn't be any hidden dangers. WN, you finally came. I was almost bored to death in the room. As soon as she heard Yuan Xiaoqiao say the word die, her wet nurse hurriedly spat twice, telling her to stop talking nonsense. Yuan Xiaoqiao hurriedly responded and didn't say anything else. She turned around and stuck out her tongue at Jingwan. It seemed that because of this matter, she had been tormented in many ways. Jingwan saw that Yuan Xiaoqiao was so energetic that she was truly relieved. However, with Yuan Xiaoqiao's lively personality, she was afraid that she really was bored to death because she couldn't move her leg. Where's Aunt? Why don't I see her? Jingwan didn't see her from the moment she entered the Yuan family's gate. Yuan Xiaoqiao pursed her lips. I think you know about our family's situation. Isn't it because there's trouble over there? My mother is now serving her like an old maid, and my grandmother and the others are also complying with her in everything. I hope she can really give birth to a son, otherwise, she'll suffer afterwards. Yuan Xiaoqiao was so relaxed and didn't worry about her mother at all because she knew that her father and grandmother treated her mother very well. Although her grandmother was also worried that her mother couldn't give birth to a grandson for her, she still repeatedly comforted her mother that this child was fate. Even if she didn't have a legitimate younger brother, her grandmother wouldn't put a concubine above her mother's head, and her father wouldn't spoil the concubine and neglect the wife. Therefore, when Jingwan said that her grandfather didn't choose the wrong person for her aunts, she wasn't just saying it. Jingwan didn't say much. In this kind of situation, as one of those lucky concubines and concubines, 9 out of 10 of them were arrogant. If they got what they wanted, they might become even more arrogant. However, if they met a powerful matriarch, it was equivalent to giving birth to a child, and there was nothing for her to do. If she was obedient, she might be able to keep her life. If she wasn't obedient, she might be able to keep the child and leave the mother. This kind of thing couldn't be more normal. Let's not talk about this anymore. It's so boring. What did you bring for me? Let me take a look. There were a few pots of green flowers and plants, big and small. They looked very spirited and made people feel comfortable just by looking at them. They're raised very well. Is there anything I need to pay attention to? What if I don't pay attention to them and they go bad? I know that cousin is a careless person, so these are very easy to raise. Jingwan looked at her with a smile. You've got guts. You dare to laugh at cousin? Yuan Xiaoqiao wanted to tickle her. Jing Wan dodged it easily. Cousin, you should wait until your leg is better before we talk about it. Yuan Xiaoqiao was so angry that she pounded the bed and said ruthlessly that when she recovered, she would definitely teach her a lesson. Jingwan saw that she was full of energy and stopped teasing her. Instead, she began to coax her and asked the servant to take out other things. Most girls would like these things. Sure enough, Yuan Xiaoqiao was very happy when she saw them. One had to know that when they were at White Dragon Temple, the simple makeup made by Jingwan gave them a big surprise. Although Jingwan didn't make a lot these days, she prepared most of it to give to her 3 good sisters. Therefore, after distributing it, it wasn't a small amount. It was enough for them to use for a while. Of course, if they were to give it away, it would be a different story. Try it on the back of your hand for 2 days. If there's no problem, use it on other places. Why? I'm worried that there will be problems like redness or rashes. How is that possible? Wan, would you harm me? Yuan Xiaoqiao waved her hand dismissively. It's not like that. Everyone's skin is different. Some things can be used, while others can't. It's like how some people will feel uncomfortable when they touch certain flowers. It's the same principle. I'm worried that you will suffer. There's such a thing. Yuan Xiaoqiao was surprised. Then, she seemed to have thought of something and her expression changed. Wan, I suddenly remembered something, so I won't keep you. You can go back first. I'll apologize to you next time. She lowered her voice. Also, about your engagement, you're really fast. I'll have to ask you properly next time. Jingwan thought that what she said probably made Yuan Xiaoqiao think of something else. She didn't want to stay any longer and got up to leave. After the wet nurse sent Jingwan and the others out and came back, Yuan Xiaoqiao hurriedly said, Wet nurse, do you think that Aunt's problem is related to what Wan said? It's possible. Miss, you mean? Aunt came to see me yesterday. I don't know how many times she cried when I saw her eyes. My heart ached when I saw her. We all know what kind of person Aunt is. She would never do such a vicious thing. Uncle's family actually made a fuss about divorcing her. If it's really like what Wan said, then everything will be solved. Then I'll go find old madam now and tell them about this matter. Okay, you can go, wet nurse. Jingwan left the Yuan residence and went directly to the Ju residence. Because she had sent the invitation yesterday, although it was a little early, it wasn't considered rude. After learning that Ju Yingshuang's eyes could actually see, there was nothing more joyous than this. Ju Yingshuang's injuries weren't serious. At this moment, she wasn't lying on the bed like Yuan Xiaoqiao. Instead, she was sitting by the window with a smile on her face. It seemed that she was in a very good mood. Did something good happen? Jingwan walked up to her and teased. Jingwan, you're here. Come and sit down. Jingwan sat down and waved her hand in front of Ju Yingshuang's eyes. Ju Yingshuang grabbed her hand and said, I can really see. Ju Yingshuang smiled sweetly. She didn't look like she was just happy because her eyes had a chance to fully recover. Can you tell me what good news it is? Ju Yingshuang's face blushed. Well, there was no need to say anything. Jingwan had already guessed it. After a moment of hesitation, she wanted to share the good news with her friend. She leaned close to Jingwan and whispered, He came to see me. He just left not long ago. Although he only said a few words outside, I'm so happy. Our family was originally discussing the marriage between me and the Lord Chancellor's son. Actually, things were almost done. Originally, I thought that because of my eyes, the marriage would probably be cancelled. I didn't expect that the second day after we came back, the Lord Chancellor's wife personally came and asked me to take care of my eyes. Today, he came in person. He still doesn't know that my eyes are getting better. I originally thought that he was just like that, but now. Very good. This was a typical example of someone who didn't care at first, but was played the tender card when they were weak. After a few words of concern and a promise of never leaving, That little heart of hers began to beat rapidly. In an instant, she fell into the trap of love and couldn't climb back up. These little girls were actually quite easy to fall in love and were also very gullible. It was just that she didn't know whether the Lord Chancellor's son was sincere, or because of the family's coercion, or because of the good reputation of being affectionate and righteous. Jingwan hoped that she could be the first. Otherwise, after the marriage, if the other party wasn't as good as she expected, she would definitely be more disappointed or even painful. A little hurt from the other party would be 10 times or 100 times more painful. However, at this time, Jingwan naturally wouldn't pour cold water on her. Little girls who fell into the river of love were similarly unreasonable. If you said that the other party wasn't good, you might have ulterior motives. Perhaps, the other party would think that you were sowing discord and couldn't bear to see her well. Good sisters, good girlfriends who turned against each other because of a man, weren't there many? Perhaps she should take some time to talk to her wet nurse and let them remind her at an appropriate time. However, these words really weren't suitable for an unmarried little girl like her to say. Jingwan suddenly patted her own head. Which woman in the inner courtyard wasn't sophisticated? Even if they hadn't seen the twists and turns of the inner courtyard, they had heard a lot of it. What else could they not think of? After reaching the same point, she no longer hesitated and took out the gift for Juing Shuang. In Gong Mama's opinion, her miss was good in every way, but sometimes she just loved to worry. And the things that she worried about basically wouldn't happen. With how much the prince cared about her, if she was unhappy, he would naturally help her get rid of the source of her unhappiness. Gong Mema had never worried that her Mrs. Close friends would have a bad life in the future, even if it was Sun Yijia who was in the worst situation right now. Chapter 93. The Lord Chancellor's wife was able to visit the Zhu family on the second day. It was not necessarily because they were so loyal and righteous. It was also possible that someone was involved in this matter. Juing Shuang took note of some of the precautions that Jingwan mentioned. She even asked Jingwan a lot of questions about skincare and skincare. When she was in Bailong Temple, although she was very interested in these, but because of her eyes, compared to Sun Yijia and Yuan Xiaoqiao, she was not so enthusiastic. Now that her eyes were just beginning to recover, she could not wait. The so-called "a woman looks good for her lover" was not false at all sometimes. However, it was human nature to always hope that the person she liked could see her best side. Therefore, Jingwan did not hide it. However, it was one thing to talk about it, and another thing to do it. And as mentioned before, the method that was suitable for Jingwan might not be suitable for Juing Shuang. Therefore, Jingwan also warned her to be serious. If she did not make herself more beautiful, but worse, the loss would outweigh the gain. However, thinking that the women here cared about their own appearance, there was no need to be too worried. They would not joke about their own faces. Because the more they talked, the more time it would take. Therefore, Jingwan was directly asked to stay in the Zhu family for lunch. After all, Juing Shuang was still recuperating. Jingwan was also worried that it would take a long time for her to be exhausted. Therefore, she left after lunch. However, she did not expect that on the way back, she met a tiger again. This time, it was not Li Hongyuan, but Sun Yilin. Compared to Li Hongyuan, Sun Yilin was much more courteous. He didn't even get off the carriage. He didn't want to attract too much attention and affect Jing Wan negatively. His carriage also didn't have any insignia. It was next to the Luo family's carriage, but one was facing east while the other was facing west. Jingwan sat in the carriage. She was more or less surprised that Sun Yilin pulled her. "May I know what young Master Sun wants?" Sun Yilin was silent for a long time. It was so long that Jingwan thought that he could not speak. Then, his somewhat hoarse and dry voice came. "I heard that Miss Luo is engaged." Jingwan almost didn't hear the last 3 words clearly. Her voice was hesitant, soft, and seemed to be mixed with a bit of disbelief. Jingwan was stunned. What was going on? When did she attract such a peach blossom? It wasn't that Jingwan thought too highly of herself and immediately thought of this. It was just that the current secular etiquette was like this. If it wasn't the girl he admired, as long as it was a man with a bit of education, he wouldn't ask another girl such a question in person. But obviously, Sun Yilin's education was absolutely top-notch. To do such a rude thing, he must regard himself as extremely important. She couldn't help but think of the words that Sun Yijia said to her not too long ago. She wanted her to be her sister-in-law and had mentioned Sun Yilin. From the looks of it, it wasn't Sun Yijia's wishful thinking. It was Sun Yilin who had such thoughts, and she strongly supported it. Jingwan fell into silence. The word love was the most difficult to understand. Logically speaking, Sun Yilin only admired her and she didn't do anything to seduce him. There was no need to care about it. The problem was that he was someone she knew and was the elder brother of her good sister. It was hard to ignore it completely. Miss Luo has a clever heart. I'm sure you understand my thoughts. Sorry. Jingwan paused and spat out these two words. Although it was a little cruel to directly cut off his thoughts, it was taboo to be clingy and ambiguous in this kind of thing. As the saying goes, if you don't make a decision, you'll be in trouble if you don't make a decision. If Jingwan's thoughts were messed up because such an outstanding man adored her and deliberately left him hanging, not only would it be disrespectful to Sun Yilin, but it would also be disrespectful to Chen Zhengmin. It might even be a disguised betrayal. Moreover, even if Jingwan admired Sun Yilin, she wouldn't do anything that went against her principles. Sun Yilin smiled bitterly and covered his face with both hands. His heart felt like it was being twisted by a knife and it was extremely painful. Perhaps he had only liked this young lady before, but after knowing that she was suddenly engaged and would marry another man in the future, that her life would not involve him and that it would be extremely difficult for him to even see her, he finally woke up from his daze. Other than her, he was afraid that he would not be able to place another woman in his heart in this lifetime. He had missed this opportunity just like that. He thought that she was still young. He thought that she had just arrived in the capital not long ago, and even if the Luo family wanted to find a husband for her, they wouldn't be able to finalize a candidate in such a short time. He thought that with his talent, appearance, character, and even his family background, when he went to the Luo family to propose marriage, the Luo family would definitely not object and everything would be done naturally. Looking at it now, it was all because he thought too highly of himself and thought too highly of himself. How could he forget that a truly good young lady would definitely be sought after by hundreds of families? If he had taken a fancy to her, he wouldn't have made his move earlier. Was he waiting for others to fight over her? Look at how smart Chen Zhengmin was. He was so stupid. That's right, Jingwan's engagement was so fast. Other than Madame Luo's uneasiness, it could also be that Chen Zhengmin and the Chen family wanted to take advantage of the fact that the treasure had not been discovered by more people to hold firmly in their hands. Only then could they be at ease. But why did it have to be these few days? Even if it was 2 or 3 days later, he could still give it a try and fight for a chance. When he found out, it was already a foregone conclusion. He was able to find out about this matter today thanks to his servant. When he was shopping with him on the street, he accidentally bumped into Chen Zhengmin, who was happily meeting his friends. Because his friends teased him, he revealed the identity of the girl. As Sun Yilin's most trusted person, he naturally knew his young master's thoughts. How could he not? He almost crawled and rolled back to tell him the news. When he heard the news, he only felt like he was struck by lightning. The only reason he had was to change into an inconspicuous carriage. When he entered the Luo family's house, he did not directly announce that he was looking for Jingwan, using his sister's name. When he found out that Jingwan had gone out, he suppressed the anxiety in his heart and waiting for an opportunity to say a few words to her. But, what could he say? Hoping that she would have the same feelings for him? In fact, the result was not unexpected at all. Miss Luo, you're really heartless. But it was precisely because of this heartless nature that he found it even more difficult to part with her. If it was someone else who immediately broke off the engagement the moment he expressed his feelings for her and wanted to marry him, he would most likely disdain her. This was the root of a person's inferiority. Jingwan remained silent. This heartless feeling was also more than passionate. Not to mention the current feudal society, even in her previous life, people who thought they were romantic and passionate were in fact fickle in love. This was something that Jingwan despised the most. If, This one is saying if Miss Luo breaks off the engagement, this one will go to the Luo family to propose marriage. Will Miss agree? Marriage is a big matter, the parents' orders, the matchmaker's words. In other words, it was not something that she could decide. Sun Yilin could not say whether this answer made him happy or disappointed. Perhaps she actually had a trace of good feelings towards him, but because of the girl's modesty, she gave a proper answer. Or perhaps she really did not care at all, but in order to save her face, she did not say anything that was hard to accept. This one understands. It was rude of me to suddenly look for Miss Luo today. Please forgive me. No, young master does not need to take it to heart. It is rare for Yi Jiao to have a close friend who understands her. I hope that your friendship will not become distant because of this one. If that is really the case, this one will not be able to absolve myself from the blame even if I die 10,000 times. Young master, please rest assured that this will not happen. Of course, this was on the premise that Sister Jiao did not let the idea of becoming her sister-in-law become an obsession. That would be for the best. I hope that today's matter will not cause any trouble for Miss Luo. This one will take his leave first. After Sun Yilin's carriage left, Jingwan's carriage also slowly moved, increasing its speed bit by bit. The two carriages were clearly moving in opposite directions. Ah, I did not expect that the famous young Master Lin actually admires our Miss Luo. Qingzhu was so surprised that she could not close her mouth when Sun Yilin came to find her. Now, she could finally speak. Wretched girl, what nonsense are you blabbering about? Can't you just keep your mouth shut? What would happen if an outsider heard this? Qingzhu subconsciously reached out to pat her. Qingzhu felt wronged. This was her personality and she couldn't change it. Because of this mouth of hers, she was often reprimanded by the wet nurse and wet nurse. Fortunately, she had never said anything she shouldn't say outside and she had Jingwan's protection. That was why she was able to stay in the position of head maidservant. Otherwise, she would have long been kicked out to be a maidservant. Moreover, so what if young Master Lin fancies our Miss Luo? Our Miss Luo is so good, it would not be strange for any young master to fancy her. Qingzhu slapped her own mouth. This servant was wrong. Sister Qingzhu is right. Our Miss Luo is the best in the world. Jingwan did not know whether to laugh or cry. She did not know when the people around her had such thoughts. Don't talk nonsense. What do you mean by the best in the world? I can't afford to be called your Miss Luo. This servant is not talking nonsense. If you don't believe me, you can ask the wet nurse. Does she think so too? Qingzhu said rather unconvinced. Yes. Wet nurse Gong nodded solemnly. She was not exaggerating. She really thought so. This time, Jingwan was really speechless. Fine, fine. Whatever you say. I can't win against you. Just forget about this matter. Don't worry, miss, how could they not know the importance of this matter? A few days ago, when she was stopped by Li Hongyuan, she was accompanied by Qing Lan and Qing Mai. If these two matters collided, she did not know what kind of thoughts they would have. Sun Yilin did not directly return to the Fu. Instead, he let someone drive the carriage aimlessly on the street. He just sat in the carriage silently. The manservant sitting outside and the attendant who was in charge of driving the carriage for him looked at each other and saw the worry in each other's eyes. Young master's state was really not right. Even if Duke Ding had once asked young Master Lin to give in for the sake of young Master Lin and not let him stand out and let him be a pure scholar and not be able to fulfill his ambitions, young Master Lin would at most be silent. It was not like now dead silence. Although it was a random walk, it was basically some of the places that Sun Yilin often went to on weekdays. The flower market was burned. Even the shops that were not affected had been closed. Moreover, if he went to see the flowers at this time, it might make young Master Lin even more sad. After all, Miss Luo was also a person who loved flowers. Who knew if he would think of her when he saw the flowers? Born in a place like Duke Ding's mansion, all of his parents and brothers were normal people. Only Sun Yilin was clean and honest. It could be said that he was incompatible with them. He was not a normal person. Once, even Duchess Ding suspected that her son had a hidden disease, so she did not even want to arrange a room for him. In fact, Sun Yilin accepted the treatment of the imperial physician without any hesitation. The result was that he was very normal. His likes and dislikes were all elegant and not deliberately cultivated. It was as if he was born this way. In addition to flowers and trees, Sun Yilin's other hobby was nothing more than calligraphy, and rare paintings. When he had nothing to do, he would talk with his friends. Compared with others who talked about the court, the world, and the common people, he was more immersed in the beautiful scenery of mountains and rivers in travel books. After all, he had come into contact with what others said. Only when you really came into contact with it, you would know the hardships and difficulties in it. It was not a matter of a few words of exaggeration, and it was not something that could be solved by a few words of what you would do if you were in his place. Therefore, the places that Sun Yilin often went were actually the places that many scholars liked to go, especially when the imperial examination in spring was imminent. Scholars from all over the country gathered together in groups of 3 or 5. They either talked loudly and expressed their ambitions, or whispered to each other and talked about knowledge. In the past, perhaps he would have the mood to quietly listen to their various beautiful visions. But now, when these things entered his ears, he only felt exceptionally irritated. Just as he was about to return home, he suddenly heard the voice of a servant. "Young master, it's that Chen family's young master, Chen Zhengmin." Sun Yilin almost subconsciously lifted the curtain of the carriage. He also wanted to see what kind of person would be able to snatch the girl he liked first, and whether he had the ability to match Miss Luo. In other places, there might not be many people who knew Sun Yilin, but there were definitely many people in the vicinity. When he appeared, someone with sharp eyes saw him and hurriedly came up to welcome him. "Young Master Lin, I haven't seen you for a long time. Do you have time today to sit in the building and have a drink?" Only then did Sun Yilin discover that this was the untitled building. Untitled people were naturally untitled. There were no words on the plaque above the door, only a square seal at the bottom left corner. This was a place that only entertained scholars. Moreover, scholars were not as simple as just knowing a few words. First, they had to prove that they could pass the threshold. There was celestial music. As long as one was able to catch it, they would definitely be able to feast their ears. There was good wine and tea, comparable to the tributes of the emperor. If one had the ability, they could use it as much as they wanted. There were precious paintings, and if one had the ability, they could also obtain them. Even if one could not take them away, they could still feast their eyes. In the backyard, there was a huge library that was all-encompassing and could be copied. And these things were all free of charge. For scholars, the untitled building was definitely the place that they yearned for the most. Especially for those students from poor families, they could not wait to soak in there for 24 hours a day. Of course, there were also relevant regulations for this situation. Otherwise, this place would be completely occupied by the students from poor families. In addition, the biggest feature of the untitled building was that it limited the number of people who could enter. In the case that it was full, people could only wait for others to leave before the people behind could enter. Even if it was a person as honorable as a prince, they also had to abide by this rule. Who was it that had such big confidence, such big spending, and dared to make such a rule? On the plaque, there was a seal with the words "as if Zhen is here in person." It was enough to explain everything. Who would dare to act rashly? Some people said in private that perhaps only Jin Qinwang dared to break the rules here. However, the living king of hell had no interest in this place. This place had existed for several years, but they had never seen a certain person set foot here. Most likely, no one knew that the untitled building was not the product of Lechengdi's whim, nor was it a wise decision. It was purely for his ignorant and incompetent evil creature son to increase his knowledge and cultivation. Lechengdi's idea was very simple. It was to let him have more contact with scholars. Maybe he would like to read. As it turned out, Lechengdi's idea was too naive. After he was once again angered to the point that he had nothing to say, he simply threw it to Li Hongyuan and let him deal with it however he wanted. In the beginning, there was no name. After that, there was no name. Lechengdi ridiculed that Li Hongyuan also had self-awareness. He knew that he did not have much knowledge, so he would not do such a shameful thing like a plaque. But Li Hongyuan's answer once again made him fall backwards in anger. Si Hen is an uneducated person. Perhaps in the future, I will be able to marry a knowledgeable wife. In the future, let your daughter-in-law do the calligraphy. Le Chengdi scolded him with a torrent of dog blood. But year after year, he was willing to let his daughter-in-law do the calligraphy, but there was no sign of this daughter-in-law. Li Hongyuan took over the untitled pavilion, but in Le Chengdi's view, that evil creature had never cared about it. All the good things inside were given by him, and the people who took care of it were also assigned by him. Le Chengdi would never know that the people he assigned were all Li Hongyuan's people. Li Hongyuan was the untitled pavilion's master on the surface, but also its actual master. Because many things in the untitled pavilion were very attractive, not to mention young people, even famous scholars were very tempted. Therefore, many calligraphy treasures were left behind. There were also some who knew that this place was closely related to the emperor, and whether they could use this place to attract the emperor's attention and soar to the sky. Therefore, they all displayed their knowledge and did not hold back. It was easy to find talented people with special talents. Li Hongyuan selected some people for his use, and then handed them to Le Chengdi. Le Chengdi was complacent that he found another talent who could contribute to the country, but he did not know that these people were loyal to the evil creature he called. Anyway, he had already shown up, and he really wanted to meet Chen Zhengmin, who had already entered the untitled pavilion, so he got off the carriage. There are still seats in the pavilion? Look at what you're saying. You're here, how can there be no seats? Sun Yilin understood. As the saying goes, there are policies from above, and countermeasures from below. When a person of high status appeared, even if the pavilion was full, there would always be people who would take the initiative to leave, either to take the opportunity to make friends, or out of respect and reverence. He did not notice it before, but it was because he did not care about worldly affairs and was stupid. Sure enough, a person came out of the pavilion and cupped his hands to Sun Yilin. This one has something to do and has to leave. Young Master Lin, please. At the same time, no one else rushed to enter. Sun Yilin nodded. Brother, why don't you leave your name card? We'll have a chat another day. The better the place, the better the teaching resources. It was different in the capital. Everything was the best under the feet of the emperor. Therefore, for themselves, for their brothers, for their friends, and even for their descendants, they had to give it their all. Sun Yilin was the youngest of the 4 heroes of the capital. One had to know that among those who participated in the imperial examination, there were many who were over 40 years old. In their eyes, Sun Yilin was still wet behind the ears, even though only those who were under 30 were qualified to be selected as the 4 heroes. Sun Yilin had not appeared for a long time, but everyone knew about his deeds in detail. He had become an official of the internal court and close to the emperor. Who knew how many people were jealous? They all thought that it was only because of his good family background and that he did not have any ability. Some people even said that if he participated in the imperial examinations, would he be able to pass as a county scholar? It had to be said that scholars never used a dirty word when cursing people, but the degree of their viciousness was definitely more piercing than that of the most shameless shrew. They could even kill people. Look at his good looks. No wonder he can gain the favor of the princes. He does indeed have the talent. The person who spoke did not avoid the taboo at all. He even purposely raised his voice. How many people did not know about the recent uproar? Thus, everyone immediately understood what these words meant. Although many of them had such thoughts, they did not think that someone would dare to say it so boldly. The building was instantly deathly silent. Sun Yilin, who was standing alone at the entrance, was even more conspicuous. He seemed to be dressed in a low-key manner, but in reality, he was dressed in brocade. Every accessory was expensive and extraordinary. They were just right on him. His actions all showed his great bearing and self-restraint. Although his eyes were somewhat cold, it still showed the world's evaluation of him. A gentleman is like a jade, unparalleled in the world. It had to be said that because of this sentence, although there were many people who wanted to laugh at him, There were even more people who frowned. This person was clearly trying to please the crowd with claptrap. He did not have the slightest strength of character and self-restraint that a scholar should have. It was really embarrassing. Especially those who had lived in the capital for a long time and had seen Sun Yilin's talent. They were very indignant. However, they did not know whether the recent events were true or false. They were only worried that if they spoke up, it would bring more trouble to him. Therefore, they did not speak up to help him. It was Chen Zhengmin who ignored his good friend's obstruction and said, "This brother, please be careful with your words. It's just a false rumor." Instead, he lost the last bit of his scholarly demeanor and cursed without thinking. Not only Sun Yilin, but also the officials, the royal family, and even the current emperor. He used his background to not give people a way out, oppressing the common people, eating a vegetarian position, not doing anything in a superior position, and so on. At this time, everyone sucked in a breath of cold air, and the people who were originally dissuading him all retreated 3 feet, afraid that they would be implicated by him. This was no longer as simple as a heart that was unable to calm down, it was purely a loss of rationality, no different from courting death. The faces of the people in Untitled Restaurant were extremely black. In the entire capital, there was no one who was the most vegetarian on the surface, other than their actual master, there was no one else. The shopkeeper ordered, "Throw him out for me." Then, that person was really lifted up on all 4 limbs and thrown out. Perhaps now that he had fallen to such a state, it was already too late to redeem himself. He might as well smash the pot that had already been broken and wanted to put on a big show in front of Untitled Restaurant. Unfortunately, before he could say a word, a few people came forward, cleanly blocked his mouth, and dragged him away. The shopkeeper's hands were folded in his sleeves as he coldly watched. Sun Yilin did not even frown, and those who had lived in the capital for a long time sneered, "What an idiot! Did he really think that the plaque outside the restaurant, 'As if I am here in person,' was just for show?" At this time, those who did not know were all silent like cicadas in winter. It turned out that outside the restaurant, there were people from the emperor. In the blink of an eye, the shopkeeper looked at Sun Yilin with a smiling face and respectfully said, "Young Master Lin, where would you like to sit?" A person who had a good relationship with Sun Yilin waved at him. Sun Yilin did not refuse his good intentions, but he did not directly go over, and instead waved at Chen Zhengmin. Then, he instructed the shopkeeper to prepare a jar of 10-year-old Huajiao wine for him. Unlike other places, the Huajiao wine of Untitled Restaurant was a first-class strong wine. Chen Zhengmin was somewhat overwhelmed by the favor, and pointed at himself in disbelief. It must be said that these young men all revered Sun Yilin. They were clearly of the same age, but Sun Yilin was already standing at the top of the mountain, while they were at most halfway up the mountain, and many were still pacing back and forth at the foot of the mountain. Chen Zhengmin's good friends were both openly and secretly urging him to hurry over. This was a rare opportunity. If he missed this village, there might not be this shop anymore. However, Chen Zhengmin was still at a loss. He only helped because he could not stand it, and did not mean anything else. However, since the other party had already invited him, he should at least go over and say hello, and not be considered rude. After thinking about it, he walked over. Young Master Lin, just now, unexpectedly, Sun Yilin did not even bother with him, and walked over to where his good friends were. "Follow me." Not to mention Chen Zhengmin, even those who were slightly familiar with Sun Yilin were somewhat confused by him. This was not his usual style. And as the person involved, Chen Zhengmin, was naturally the most affected. Just a short moment of eye contact, and he could clearly feel the coldness in his attitude, and that extremely critical sizing up, and finally, there was dissatisfaction written in his eyes. What was going on? "Young Master Chen, please come over for a moment." After Sun Yilin sat down, he saw that Chen Zhengmin was still standing at the same spot in a daze, his fingers tapping on the table, and the speed was rather fast. If his servant was here, he would know that his young master was a little irritable. The first time he saw Chen Zhengmin, he felt that he was far from being worthy of Miss Luo. Perhaps there was no problem with his character, but his heart was too upright, and this was not suitable to be in the official circle. However, Without a high position and generous salary, how could he pamper Miss Luo? Could it be that after marriage, she would give up the things she loved, and work hard for the family's livelihood? Moreover, he looked too immature. If he married an ordinary lady, perhaps they would be called a perfect match. However, that was Miss Luo. If she were to be together with Chen Zhengmin, those who did not know would think that it was Miss Luo who was taking care of a child. Also, sometimes he looked dull. What kind of interest could there be? For a man who was full of flaws from head to toe, how much responsibility could he have? The problems that Sun Yilin was thinking about might exist, but it was far from being that serious. It was because he cared too much, and because he was just a step late, he had lost to such a person. Even if it was unintentional, he had subconsciously magnified the other party's flaws by 100 times, and was nitpicking at him. Young Master Lin knows me. Chen Zhengmin was once again surprised, and in Sun Yilin's eyes, he was once again a fool. Seeing that Sun Yilin's speed of knocking on the table was getting faster and faster, even the dullest person could tell that this young Master Lin did not seem to be in a good mood. He was usually such a gentle person, but now he could not suppress his anxiety, which meant that the matter should be very serious. The surrounding people subconsciously slowed down their breathing. Sun Yilin had a high position among the scholars in the capital, and in addition to his noble status, some people even unconsciously pushed him up to the altar. When he showed the emotions that ordinary people had, it was as if he had suddenly stepped down from the altar, but people could not help but take care of his emotions. Chen Zhengmin hurriedly took 2 steps forward. Does young Master Lin have any instructions? Serve me with brush and ink. Untitled Restaurant naturally did not lack the 4 treasures of the study. Just as Sun Yilin's voice fell, the waiter brought the things over. Even the grindstone had already been ground. Sun Yilin took the brush and dipped it in ink, waved his hand and wrote 4 big words, then pushed it to Chen Zhengmin. If you write well, I will personally present it to His Majesty. Once these words came out, everyone was shocked. This was simply paving a path to heaven in advance. Not to mention whether or not His Majesty would immediately put him in an important position, as long as he could leave a good impression. By the time the court examination came, as long as his essay was not bad, he might even be selected by His Majesty. This represented not only glory, but also a prosperous career. If he had known that he would get such an opportunity just by saying a word of help, that person would have been directly scolded to death by them. They were jealous of Chen Zhengmin's good luck, and secretly cursed Sun Yilin for changing his previous behavior. In the past, so many people tried to curry favor with him, but not only did they not receive any benefits, they even became people that he refused to interact with. Now, just by using this method, he wanted to tell those who had opinions about him that he had the means to reach the heavens. Then you, Sun Yilin, have done it. Chen Zhengmin did not expect that such a thing would happen to him. It would be a lie to say that he was unhappy, but to say that he was extremely excited, that was definitely not the case. After all, he still had the nobility of a scholar. Even if he wanted to be an official and benefit the common people, he wanted to use his own ability, and not this kind of shortcut. However, because his grandfather had been an official of the imperial court, he had told him a lot about it. He knew that the bureaucracy was not a place where one could climb up through hard work. There was a huge difference between having someone to help you and fighting alone. Although he was entering the bureaucracy now, there would be Luo Shongshu to help him, but one more person meant one more path. He hoped that when they got married 2 years later, he could let his cousin be even more glorious, and let others envy her for marrying such a good husband, and not ridicule her for marrying such an incompetent husband. Why, is there a problem? Can't do it, or is it because you don't want to do it? He put away his gentleness, leaving behind only coldness. Once again, he clearly felt that young Master Lin had opinions about him. Furthermore, he knew who he was. Could it be that he had unintentionally done something to offend him? Now, he was clearly giving him a chance, but in reality, he was preparing to make things difficult for him. But after thinking it through, he found it hard to reject such an opportunity. Whether it was an opportunity or a trap, he would only know after the matter was over. There were both good and bad things, and if he did not do it, he might not be able to completely avoid it. But if he did it, There might be great benefits. There was no need to hesitate about what to choose. Then, this one will show his incompetence. Chen Zhengmin's pen seemed to be full of spirit, and he did not stop writing. It could be seen that he was very confident, and his writing was also very smooth. Compared to people of the same age, he was already very good. Sun Yilin's tense face finally relaxed. At least there was something good about him. If his knowledge was not good, even if he had to be a villain for once, he would think of a way to ruin this marriage. The current Sun Yilin and Li Hongyuan belonged to two extremes. Li Hongyuan did things by unscrupulous means, but because of his father's interference since young, Sun Yilin had been learning the way of a gentleman. For example, on the matter of Jingwan, he hoped that Jingwan would be better, and not the actions of a villain. He must snatch Jingwan. He was going through a metamorphosis, but something that was engraved in his bones was not so easy to remove. No longer caring about what Chen Zhengmin's final article would be, Sun Yilin began to drink cup after cup. At first, he did not attract the attention of others, but gradually, more and more people focused their attention on him. What exactly happened to young Master Lin? One cup after another was not enough. Sun Yilin directly picked up the wine pot, raised his head, and the clear wine flowed into his mouth in a line. Gulp, gulp, gulp. The part that he did not have time to swallow slipped out of his mouth, some of it soaked his clothes, and some of it fell to the ground. After finishing the pot, he threw it away, and picked up the second pot. One must know that a pot of Huajie wine could hold more than 10 pots. Yilin, you can't drink like this. His friend could not stand it and reached out to grab the wine pot. Move away. Sun Yilin swatted his hand away. Yilin, what happened? What happened? Sun Yilin tilted his head and was stunned. Nothing, I'm fine. Sun Yilin rarely drank, so his alcohol tolerance was not very good. After 3 pots, he was completely drunk. However, he was like most people, and did not admit that he was drunk. Done. Let me take a look. He stood up and shakily took Chen Zhengmin's article, shook his head, and quickly read it. He did not comment, but took a pen and began to write. Even if he was drunk, his writing was still steady. Or perhaps it was because he was drunk, his writing was wild and impeccable. However, the content was frightening, extremely sharp, and penetrating. Even the onlookers felt uncomfortable, not to mention the emperor. Even if Sun Yilin was the emperor's favorite person, if this article were to spread, he would be in trouble. After he finished writing, Sun Yilin put down the pen and stared at the paper in a daze. Perhaps it was because he was a little shocked when he looked at it again. He became sober and rubbed the corner of his eyes. This is the homework that the emperor gave me today. He asked me to submit it tomorrow. Young Master Chen, please write another article that you are good at. Be careful. It seemed that he intended to submit his own article as well. Hiss, the people around all gasped. This was too bold. However, after they calmed down and thought about it, this seemed to be the wisest thing to do. Sun Yilin was a member of Prince Kang's faction. This article was actually a weakness. With so many people seeing it, it was better to do it himself instead of letting his opponent submit it. Perhaps this boldness would gain the emperor's favor and make him think more of him. Even if he was punished in the end, it was better than being falsely accused by his opponent. However, it was also because of this article that they knew that Sun Yilin's reputation was not undeserved. He was worthy of being one of the 4 heroes of the capital and did not disgrace this name. Other than a few arrogant and conceited people, after secretly comparing in their hearts, they all expressed that they were far inferior compared to Sun Yilin. Young Master Lin, what are you being long-winded for? Hurry up and write. Or is this all you can do? Have you exhausted all your skills? Previously, she was only cold and hard, but now, she was simply icy cold. Perhaps because of her attitude, Chen Zhengmin had some thoughts of competing with her. Therefore, when an article came out, everyone was surprised. This article, compared to the previous one, was not just a little bit better. Moreover, this did not mean that his previous article was not good. Was this brat hiding his strength just now? Faced with everyone's doubts, Chen Zhengmin was a little embarrassed. To be honest, After he finished writing, he was a little surprised himself. He had exceeded his usual performance. Very good. Even Sun Yilin gave such an evaluation. Maintain this momentum. He folded the 3 articles and put them properly in his sleeve. Help me out. The last words were also said to Chen Zhengmin. Seeing that he could not stand steadily, Chen Zhengmin's anger had almost dissipated because of that article, so he did not refuse. Sun Yilin's servant, who was outside, heard that his young master was drinking to drown his sorrows and was extremely worried. However, due to the rules, he could not enter and could only wait anxiously. When he saw him coming out, he hurriedly went up to welcome him. Beside the carriage, Sun Yilin tugged at Chen Zhengmin. If you don't treat her well, don't blame me for snatching her. Chen Zhengmin was confused and did not understand. What did young Master Lin say? Miss Luo, if I was not held back by other matters, how could it be your turn? Chen Zhengmin's face changed. He finally understood the reason for his strange attitude. No wonder someone reminded him to move quickly. He was not the only one who thought highly of the Luo family's 3rd young lady. He did not expect that there would be such a strong competitor. I will not give young Master Lin a chance. Sun Yilin smiled coldly and allowed his own people to help him into the carriage. If he did not drink, he probably would not have said such a declaration. After all, if he met a narrow-minded man, he would most likely suspect that his fiancée was a promiscuous woman. This would definitely cause a lot of trouble for Jingwan. But he drank too much and was not so rational. If he did not let Chen Zhengmin know of his existence, he would always feel a little indignant. If he did not give him some pressure, he would still think that it was natural for him to get the beauty. Without any hindrance, he would not know how to cherish her properly. Chen Zhengmin looked at the carriage slowly leaving and the sense of urgency in his heart grew stronger. What did this young Master Lin have to do with him? One moment he was still revering him and the next moment he wished he could kick him far away. His cousin was his and they were already engaged. He was justified and no one could snatch her away. So what if he was proud of himself? As long as he did not marry his cousin, he might not be able to be proud until the end. So what if he was confident of passing the imperial examinations? After realizing the gap between him and Sun Yilin, his goal was to at least get 1st rank. If he could not even get 1st rank, what qualifications did he have to talk about? Chen Zhengmin returned to the untitled building and bid farewell to his friends. What he needed to do was to go back and continue his studies and not waste his time on such meaningless things. Everyone was confused by his actions and in the end, they only thought that he was provoked by Sun Yilin. The matter here had just ended and many people from the other parties had already received the news. There was no other way. Sun Yilin had been in the limelight recently and even the slightest movement would alert them. Moreover, this matter was not considered small. His opponents sighed inwardly. Even if he was drunk, he was still meticulous and thoughtful. Everything was out in the open. It was obviously not advisable to submit his essay before him. However, it did not mean that they could not do something. They could criticize his arrogance and shameless boasting. If they could reduce the emperor's good impression of him to 0, that would be the best. After all, it was a fact that 2 princes fought because of him. It was inevitable that the emperor would have a knot in his heart. However, the deepest impression that this matter left on them was that the usually gentle and amiable Sun Yilin actually had the potential to be arrogant. They could not tell. Li Hongyuan naturally knew about this matter at the first moment. Compared to the other people who only received the complete contents of the 3 essays, Li Hongyuan received the original. That's right, there was such an expert in the untitled building. As long as he took a look, he would be able to copy almost 100% of the original. The reason why it was close was mainly because the form was exactly the same, but the charm was sometimes a little lacking. This was something that could not be helped. No matter how skilled a person was, it was not easy to enter the state of another person's writing. For example, Sun Yilin's essay. In Li Hongyuan's view, it was already not bad if it had 20 to 30% of the charm of the original. Even if Sun Yilin was a love rival, Li Hongyuan did not deny him. After reading Chen Zhengmin's 2 essays, The difference was a little big, but that was it. He threw the 3 essays to the side. Sun Yilin was so kind to help recommend him. This will save us the effort of wasting our time on Chen Zhengmin. If he still can't enter the 1st grade, don't blame this prince for giving him an even worse wife. Chapter 95. As for the previous farce about the love triangle, Li Hongyuan was also very straightforward at the beginning. He directly threatened that he liked Sun Yilin, so he might as well let him enter the residence with Sun Yijia. In ancient times, there was a beautiful story of a sister serving a husband. Now that he had a sister serving a husband, it might become a beautiful thing many years later. Not to mention Le Chengdi and Duke Dingguo, even the Empress was very angry. In the past, whenever Li Hongyuan caused trouble, although she stood in the Empress's position and demanded severe punishment, out of 10 times, at least 7 or 8 times, she was just putting on a show. Although she was angry about the other 2 or 3 times, it was only 20 or 30%. This time, her anger soared to 12%. Although Li Hongyi was a good-for-nothing, he was still her son and the biggest chess piece in her desire to seize power. Without this son, all her schemes would be in vain. However, Li Hongyuan ruthlessly injured him. Li Hongyi also said that at that moment, he really felt that Li Hongyuan wanted to kill him. She didn't think that her son would lie to her about this kind of thing. How could this be? There was also Sun Yilin, who was her most promising nephew and also a good chess piece she had prepared. The higher his status at Le Chengdi's side, the more advantageous it would be for her future. Otherwise, why would she repeatedly create opportunities for Sun Yilin to show his face in front of the emperor? Everything was going smoothly. Le Chengdi didn't like the people of Duke Dingguo's mansion, except for Sun Yilin. In addition, Sun Yilin was even more famous. With his appearance, he was bound to win over more talents of the same generation. When things became clear in the future, even if he knew that she, the Empress Dowager behind the scenes, had the final say, he didn't need to blatantly express his support for her. He only needed to remain silent. Then, there would be a lot less memorials to depose her, and she would have a lot less trouble. One day, she would be able to naturally interfere in court affairs and no one would say anything. But Li Hongyuan wanted to destroy him, so, how could she not be angry? It was also because of this that this time, she was truly going against noble consort Su. Compared to the Empress's people, Imperial concubine Su and the others were unusually carefree, especially Li Hongming. He secretly regretted that Li Hongyuan didn't directly kill Li Hongyuan. In this way, he only needed to sacrifice him. Not only would he lose his biggest competitor, but he would also be the most legitimate successor in terms of etiquette. However, he also knew that Li Hongyuan was not stupid. How could he so easily stain his brother's life? However, as his mother, even if Imperial concubine Su felt that her opponent deserved it, she still had to teach him a lesson. Therefore, unlike the Empress who insisted on severely punishing Li Hongyuan, she scolded Li Hongyuan while pleading with Le Chengdi. The 2 most noble women in the imperial harem also began to quarrel. The Empress said that Imperial concubine Su had to take the main responsibility for Li Hongyuan's current situation. It was she who didn't teach the prince well and had let down the Emperor's grace. Imperial concubine Su said that Li Hongyuan was just playing with Sun Yilin. It was Li Hongyi who started it first. If he didn't resist, would he just wait to be beaten to death? One had to know that her son was still injured. Li Hongyi was so vicious that if he wasn't his brother, he wouldn't be the eldest brother. Her Yuan should be punished, and he couldn't escape the blame. The back and forth was really lively. In contrast, Le Chengdi was strangely calm. Le Chengdi received a bunch of memorials to impeach Li Hongyuan. This matter was different from the past. Li Hongyuan had lost the face of the imperial family. Not to mention Imperial concubine Su and Li Hongming's opponents, even most of the neutral members of the imperial family demanded severe punishment. Otherwise, how could they restore the imperial prestige? Le Chengdi's strange attitude this time was unknown. It was unknown whether it was because he was used to Li Hongyuan causing trouble from time to time, or because he had already expected this day to come when he first heard that his son was in love with Nan Feng. He even had the interest to look through the memorials that accused Li Hongyuan of 10 major crimes. As he read, he laughed happily. Hee, look at our son. He's different from others. He's been so energetic since he was young. If he didn't cause trouble one day, I would find it strange. Seeing such an abnormal Lechengdi, the attendants all pretended to be deaf and dumb. Anyway, there would be a few days like this every year. Mother, how will father punish sixth brother this time? Li Hongyi asked Imperial Concubine Su. Imperial Concubine Su was startled and said with a bit of sadness, there won't be any punishment. Yuan Er's birth mother's death anniversary has arrived. If he hadn't been assassinated, he would still be praying in White Dragon Temple. The imperial noble consort back then, what exactly, Ming this isn't something you should ask. It won't do you any good to know. Mother, how will father punish sixth brother? Li Hongyi, who was recuperating in Kunyi Palace, pounded the bed and asked the Empress with hatred in his eyes. The Empress looked at him coldly. I just told you not to go against him. You just left the palace and you directly attacked him. You completely ignored my words. Now you're asking me, isn't it too unnecessary? The hatred in Li Hongyi's eyes immediately dissipated. As a man, he looked at the Empress at a loss. Mother, it's not that I don't listen to you. It's just that Li Hongyuan, that bastard, is too infuriating. I was muddle-headed for a moment. The Empress sneered, the result of being muddle-headed for a moment is that you lost all your advantages. Even if you were reasonable, you became unreasonable. You still want Li Hongyuan to be punished. You haven't woken up yet. I'm injured like this. Are we just going to let it go like this? Li Hongyi was so angry that his eyes were red. That's because you're not as skilled as others. You asked for it. Besides, Li Hongyuan is your father's favorite. Who do you think you are? If he is severely punished, do you think you can escape? It's good enough that your father can give you some compensation. Besides, the imperial noble consort's death anniversary is approaching. These days, your father is the most unreasonable. It's possible that he will punish you and reward Li Hongyuan. Think about it carefully. How many old officials actually impeached Li Hongyuan? Even if they did, it's just for show. After the initial anger, the Empress immediately thought that this time she might only suffer a loss. However, she had already made a fuss. She couldn't stop just because she wanted to. Otherwise, how could she explain to her own people? It was hard to get off a tiger. She could only continue to make a fuss. The result was probably that Lechengdi would be even more annoyed. Because of this, it was more and more depressing. Since the imperial noble consort is so important, why didn't anyone mention her in the past few years? Why didn't my father worship her on her death anniversary every year? I said you're stupid. You're really stupid. Do I have to tell you clearly before you understand? That woman's death is strange. Is it strange that your father doesn't worship her? How many people will remember a person who has been dead for more than 20 years? Because your father is the Son of Heaven, his every move is watched, so that woman hasn't been completely forgotten. Those old officials who know about this clearly know that your father hates it. Who will be stupid enough to spread it everywhere? They know that your father is abnormal on these days every year, so naturally, they won't provoke him. This year, Li Hongyuan happened to cause trouble, so. The Empress paused. Maybe Li Hongyuan also chose this time to deliberately provoke you. Maybe someone wants to take advantage of this special day to assassinate him in White Dragon Temple. But each of you lost people. Who will benefit the most? Because his own mother said that he was stupid, Li Hongyi almost refuted her and said that she also gave birth to him. But in the end, he couldn't say it. He was angry, but he couldn't say it. Now, seeing that she was still lost in thought and didn't take him seriously at all, Li Hongyi didn't know how to react. Maybe it was because he was stupid and easy to control that he could live well until now. If he was smarter and didn't obediently be a pawn in her hand, she could naturally ruthlessly abandon him. Maybe she could use him to plot against noble consort Su once and then adopt someone who would listen to her. Li Hongyi thought that it was rare for him to be smart, but the result was so sad. Yilin's attitude is a bit strange this time. Wasn't it very strange? From the beginning to the end, Sun Yilin was very quiet and calm. Except for telling the truth about the incident, he didn't say anything else. He didn't judge others right or wrong. Even when he faced Le Chengdi with others, he was the same. He didn't get angry because of being humiliated, nor did he pretend to be calm. Duke Ding let him take the position of the victim's family and let Le Chengdi make a decision for him. He was bound to get justice. Sun Yilin just looked at him for a moment and then opened his mouth. Actually, I'm not father's son. Otherwise, why didn't you consider me even once? Evil creature, what did you say? Duke Ding didn't know if it was because he was disobeyed or because Sun Yilin had seen through his thoughts. He felt that he was ashamed of this son and used anger to cover himself. Isn't it? Father clearly thinks that I haven't lost enough face. Do I have to cry endlessly like a woman and beg for death to make you satisfied? Does my good Dage wish that I could really do as Jin Qinwang wishes and enter Jin Qinwang Fu with my Mai and completely sweep away this obstacle of mine? How can you think of your Dage like that? When you were young, he treated you so well, don't you know? You're also talking about when I was young. If it wasn't because of the affection when I was young, would I have tolerated it until now? Father, what did he do in the end, and how much did you tacitly allow? I won't list them one by one, so as not to completely cut off the last bit of kinship. What you do, I don't care. But what I do, you'd better not care. Although the relationship between Duke Ding and Sun Yilin was thin, Sun Yilin still didn't contradict him. Suddenly, Duke Ding only felt that his dignity as a father was seriously provoked. Evil creature, you're rebelling against the heavens. At the same time, he slapped him. However, Sun Yilin really rebelled against the heavens. He grabbed Duke Ding's hand. Even if I'm rebelling against the heavens, it's because you forced me. Evil creature, you still dare to fight with Laozi. Do you believe that Laozi will expel you from the family? Sun Yilin sneered. When I was in White Dragon Temple, I asked Mother to bring you a few words. Obviously, she didn't tell you. Father, you might as well go and ask. After asking clearly, you can decide how to deal with me. If you really want to expel me from the family, I will frown. Once I leave the gate of Duke Ding's mansion, I will die without a burial place. But before that, I have to have a good contest with my good Dage. You might as well let me take a good look at Dage's ability after running the business for so many years and with your help. Shaking off Duke Ding's hand, he turned and strode away. Duke Ding looked at Sun Yilin's back as he left. Just like Duchess Ding at White Dragon Temple, he was a little stunned. When did his son become so tough? However, his ruthlessness made him look like a real member of the Sun family. But why was his attitude toward the family instead of the outside world? Duke Ding couldn't help but reflect on whether he had really done something wrong. He also knew that he was ashamed of his son and admitted that his son was better than the eldest son. It wasn't that he didn't hesitate, but he knew very well that there couldn't be two tigers on one mountain. Everything he did was for Duke Ding's mansion. If his son was the eldest son, then there would be no problem. Unfortunately, there weren't so many IFS in the world. Of course, he was angry to expel his son from the family. If he really did that, he didn't know how many people would laugh at him. People such as his mother and the Empress sister would definitely kill him. Not only that, if he dared to do so, his son would be received with the courtesy of a distinguished guest when he went out. How stupid would he be to do such a thing that would harm himself and benefit others? However, his wife had concealed such an important thing, so he had to ask her immediately. If he didn't know the thoughts of his son, who he thought he understood very well, but in fact, he didn't understand at all, he would only be more passive and lose his dignity as a father. Not to mention how Duke Ding and his wife quarreled, Sun Yilin also let Li Hongyuan talk nonsense there. He insisted that there was something unusual between them. Anyway, when he had enough, this matter would be almost over. In the past few days, Le Chengdi had always been kind to Li Hongyuan. In the end, he even said, Yuan, just tell me directly. What do you want? If you really want a male concubine, I'll help you. Your Majesty. More than one person hurriedly tried to dissuade him. Shut up. I'm not asking you. As gentle as the spring breeze, he became as cold as ice in the blink of an eye. Only a few people had seen Lechengdi like this more than 20 years ago. Even if it was an emperor with a relatively gentle temperament, as long as he was in power, as long as he was the real emperor, no one could stop him when he decided to do something. The so-called thunder and rain were all the grace of the emperor. Li Hongyuan's face was expressionless. In his previous life, his father had not been so indulgent towards him. In fact, his father had been very cold towards him. Other than the fact that he was not a bastard, it was also because of his outstanding performance. That's right. Li Hongyuan knew very early that the more he was a bastard and the more trouble he caused, the better his father would treat him. As for the other things, no matter how precious, should be directly kept at the bottom of the chest and stuffed into the innermost part. Although Li Hongyuan's temper was very bad, when it came to sending things to his fu, the chamberlains still fought over it. There was no other way. Li Hongyuan's hands were wide, and any random reward would not be less than 100 taels. This was a good thing that would not happen anywhere else. Once again, Lechengdi's actions were known to the entire capital at the fastest speed. Whether it was those who already knew that he had no bottom line towards Li Hongyuan, or those who had just entered the capital and hadn't heard of it, they were all speechless for a long time. Then, those who were in the know warned those who were not in the know that in the capital, no matter who they provoked, they shouldn't provoke the king of hell, Jin Qinwang Li Hongyuan. If they met him, it was best to stay far away from him. At the same time, some people's thoughts began to become active. This Jin Qinwang was so favored, maybe in the future he could, if he was under his tutelage. In the blink of an eye, this idea was ruthlessly dispelled. In the past, it wasn't that no one had done this, but the end was very miserable. Before entering the gate of Jin Qinwang Fu, their legs were broken and they were thrown out. If there were still people who didn't give up, what was thrown out was a human skin. If their lives were gone, what glory, splendor, wealth, and rank could they talk about? However, Lechengdi had said that this was only a misunderstanding. In the end, nothing happened. Sun Yilin, Gongzi Lin, still wanted to drown his sorrows in wine, borrowing drunkenness to become crazy. What was the reason? Sun Yilin being carried back in a drunken state naturally alarmed everyone in the Fu. Whether it was genuine concern or fake concern, one by one, they all gathered in Sun Yilin's courtyard. Unfortunately, no matter who asked, Sun Yilin kept his mouth shut. When he was annoyed, he directly told them to scram. People who didn't lose their temper were the scariest when they lost their temper. When Sun Yijia arrived, Sun Yilin's door was surrounded by 3 layers of people. They thought that they were whispering very softly, but when there were so many people, they joined together, just like those annoying flies. Sun Yijia looked on coldly. Suddenly, a servant girl bumped into her from the side and pulled off her veil, seemingly intentionally or unintentionally. A scream instantly attracted everyone's attention. Then, they all saw the hideous wound on Sun Yijia's face. One by one, they subconsciously covered their mouths. Previously, they didn't see how badly she was injured, but they didn't expect it to be so serious. There were some who sympathized, but there were even more who gloated. Older sister, I'm sorry. Younger sister was suddenly frightened, so, no, actually, that. A girl who was dressed very delicately was frightened. She was trembling, but she pretended to be calm and stammered as she explained. She looked very pitiful. The servant girl who bumped into Sun Yijia also knelt on the ground, kowtowing and begging for mercy. Older sister Jo's face, slap a crisp sound rang out, and everyone fell silent. They looked in disbelief at Sun Yilin, who had just finished hitting Sun Yilin and calmly put back his veil. Noisy. She gently glanced at the servant girl on the ground and said, "Take this impetuous servant girl away and flog her 50 times. After 50 flogs, those who were in good condition could still be alive, but most of them would directly die." The servant girl was scared and really kowtowed to beg for mercy. After a few thuds, blood appeared on her forehead. However, Sun Yilin was completely unmoved. 2 strong old maids behind her directly came forward, gagged the servant girl, and dragged her away. The girl who had been beaten covered her face, and her eyes were full of hatred. However, probably because she was used to enduring, she didn't lose her temper. But her tears rolled down like a broken string of beads. Older sister, I just. She was very aggrieved. If you dare to say one more word, I will make you become like me. Sun Yilin touched her face meaningfully. In the eyes of everyone, Sun Yijia, who was disfigured, was like a mad dog. Who knew if she really did what she said? Others didn't dare to say anything, but the girl's mother was very distressed. Her face was beaten so hard that it was obviously swollen. In 3 days, it would be Great Elder Princess's birthday. What should she do if the swelling still didn't go down? Sister Jio, as the saying goes, when it is possible to forgive, forgive. Besides, your sister is just timid. She is not. Sun Yijia glanced at her coldly and said, I am teaching a servant girl and a sister of a concubine a lesson. As a concubine, how dare you interrupt? Who gave you the courage? This is my 5th brother's courtyard. As a concubine, what are you doing here? This is the outer courtyard, and my 5th brother is not a child of 3 or 5 years old. Do you still have any manners? What's the matter? Could it be that you despise my father for being old, so you're recommending yourself to my 5th brother? Sun Yilin's words were undeniably vicious, and she overturned a group of people with one stroke. The onlookers' faces turned pale, and it was very interesting. Sister Jio, how can you say that? Where is your upbringing? Sun Yijia glanced at the aunt who spoke, and said, Upbringing? Then tell me, what did I say or do wrong? She had nothing to say. This was indeed not a place where they should have come. At most, it would be good enough if the brothers and sisters came to take a look. Even if the aunts wanted to come, they had to choose the right time. It was broad daylight now, and Sun Yilin's close friends might come to visit. It was not good to bump into them, not to mention those concubines who usually could not go out without the guidance of the head wife. My mother has only relaxed for a few days, and each of you has become wild. You dare to ignore the rules and run to the outer courtyard. You even arrogantly preach to me. Based on your current actions, I can lock you all up in the family temple. Although Sun Yijia said a few concubines, she was also hinting at them. My son is right. I have been so busy recently that I forgot. Each of you has begun to jump around. Immediately scram back. Your salary will be deducted for 3 months, and you will be grounded for 3 months. You will also have to copy the female admonition 1,000 times. Duchess Ding had not had time to change out of the heavy makeup she had put on because of receiving the imperial edict. She looked graceful and noble. With a cold face, she looked dignified without being angry. This attire was a thorn in the eyes of almost every married woman present. It was a symbol of status. Madam, you can't. A concubine who looked not much older than Sun Yijia said angrily. Do you really want to live in the family temple? Duchess Ding said coldly, Oh, by the way, you can also go to the Duke to plead for mercy. Let's see if the Duke will come to me to put in a good word for you. There was a hint of mockery and disdain in her voice. As long as there was no real problem with the inner courtyard's affairs or there was a reason for it, this man would generally not intervene. If they met a head wife who was willing to pretend to be virtuous and magnanimous, the concubines and concubines should thank the heavens. When she shed all pretense of cordiality and did not intend to play with them anymore, if they dared to bump into her, it was no different from courting death. Why are you still here? Are you waiting for me, your sister-in-law, to invite you one by one? They had thought that her daughter and son had been in trouble one after another, and they heard that she quarreled with Duke Ding almost every day. Moreover, the inner courtyard of Duke Ding's mansion was really loose. They all thought that she had really lost power this time, and it was time for those young and beautiful concubines and their daughters to make a comeback. It turned out that she was not. A tiger was a tiger after all. Don't think that you can be a tyrant when it takes a nap. When it gets angry again, it can crush you to death with one paw. It seemed that not only Sun Yijia but also the head wife of Duke Ding's mansion went crazy. They immediately scattered like birds and beasts. Even if these girls were deprived of the opportunity to go to Great Elder Princess's mansion, they did not dare to say more. Duchess Ding's face softened. Ijia, I'm sorry to make you suffer. Sun Ijia twitched the corners of her mouth, but when she thought that her mother could not see it, she no longer forced herself. After all, there was a gap between mother and daughter. Even if they seemed to be closer than before on the surface, in fact, it was not the case. Mother, I'm not wronged. Then they looked at each other speechlessly and walked into the room at the same time, trying to dispel the invisible embarrassment. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.